What if the you trying to be authentic isn't even you? What if every authenticity coach, every self-help book, every be yourself mantra is teaching you to be a perfect lie? I'm about to show you why the authenticity industry might be the greatest con job ever played on consciousness itself. But first, if you're tired of spiritual teachers who pretend to have all the answers, you've found your people. This is the One Paradox Collective, where questions illuminate more than answers ever could. Here's what no one talks about. Right now, as you're watching this, there are literally two beings inhabiting your body. One thinks it's the owner, the other actually is. Carl Jung spent his entire career studying this. He discovered that when the ego, the you that thinks it runs the show, discovers there's another consciousness living in the same body, it feels what he called mortal terror. Because suddenly the ego realizes, I don't own this life. I don't decide anything. I'm not even real. So when you're trying to be authentic, which one is doing the trying? The resident who thinks it owns the place, or the actual owner who's been watching this whole comedy unfold? Let me ask you something uncomfortable. When you look in the mirror and think, I'm going to be more authentic today, who exactly is making that decision? You probably think, well, I am obviously. I'm the owner of my life, my body, my choices. But here's what the consciousness researchers discovered. That sense of ownership is just ego inflation disguising itself as self-awareness. There's a consciousness teacher who puts it brutally. People think I am the owner of my life. I do what I want. But when they discover they don't decide anything, imagine the ego's shock. Think about it. If there are two centers of consciousness in you and one of them is divine, infinite, connected to everything, and the other is just a bundle of thoughts that thinks it's separate, which one should you be authentic to? Here's the trap nobody sees coming. Most authenticity work is actually ego inflation, not awakening. I'm being true to myself. I'm expressing my authentic voice. I won't let society mold me. But what if myself is just a collection of reactions, preferences, and opinions that you mistake for identity? What if trying to be authentic is like a wave trying to be more wave-like while denying its ocean? Oh, but it gets better. Because now we have an entire industry built around helping you find your authentic self. Courses on authentic living, workshops on expressing your true voice, coaches who promise to help you break free from conformity. And guess what happens? Millions of people conforming to the same authenticity formulas, all rebels following the same rebellion script. All unique individuals expressing their uniqueness in identical ways. The spiritual marketplace has turned authenticity into another product. Another achievement, another way for the ego to feel special. Look how authentic I am. Look how I don't conform. Look how I've found my true self. But what's the ego doing here? It's taking credit for dissolving itself. It's bragging about its own death. Here's what Jung discovered. There are only two possibilities for human consciousness: individuation or inflation. Individuation means the ego gradually dissolves into the larger self. The wave remembers it as part of the ocean. Inflation means the ego gets bigger, claims more territory, becomes more convinced of its own importance. Most of what we call authenticity, work, is actually inflation disguised as spirituality. I'm not like other people. I'm awake. I see through the matrix. I'm authentic. That's not the self speaking. That's the ego wearing a spiritual costume. But here's where it gets really strange. What if individual authenticity is impossible because there's only one consciousness expressing itself through billions of bodies? Quantum physics suggests consciousness might be fundamental to reality. Ancient wisdom traditions say the self is universal. Modern neuroscience shows the boundaries of self are much more fluid than we thought. So whose authenticity are you trying to express? If consciousness is collective, if we're all waves in the same ocean, if the self in you is the same self in everyone, then personal authenticity becomes a beautiful contradiction. What if wisdom doesn't emerge from individuals finding themselves, but from individuals losing themselves in collective inquiry? What if the most authentic thing you could do is stop trying to be authentic? This is why we don't promise enlightenment here. We don't sell certainty. We don't have gurus with all the answers. Instead, we explore questions that have no answers. We embrace paradoxes that can't be resolved. We create space for collective wisdom to emerge. Because maybe authenticity isn't something you find. Maybe it's something that finds you when you stop looking. Maybe it emerges in the space between questions, in the pause between thoughts, in the collective exploration of what it means to be human. So here we are at the end of a video about authenticity with more questions than we started with, which is exactly where we want to be. If there are two beings in your body, which one is watching this video right now? What if the moment you try to be authentic, you've already failed? How can you be individually authentic in a collective universe? What if authenticity isn't about finding yourself, but losing yourself? What if the most authentic people are those who've stopped trying to be authentic? These aren't questions to answer alone in your room. They're not puzzles to solve with your thinking mind. They're paradoxes to live with, to explore together, to let transform you without knowing how. Because here's what we've discovered at the One Paradox Collective. The best insights come not from gurus, but from seekers bold enough to question everything together. When that happens, something emerges that none of us could access alone. So here's your assignment, and it's the opposite of what every other coach will give you. Stop trying to be authentic for a week. Just stop. See what happens when you're not performing authenticity, when you're not trying to be special or different or true to yourself, and then come back and tell us what you discovered. Because the most authentic thing about the One Paradox Collective is we don't promise you'll find yourself here. We promise something better. The courage to stay curious, the wisdom to embrace uncertainty, and the joy of discovering that the best questions have no answers. Drop a comment with the biggest authenticity question you're afraid to ask out loud, because in our collective, your question might be someone else's breakthrough. Remember, your spiritual teacher might be wrong about authenticity, but your questions are perfect exactly as they are. See you in the paradox.